After my husband suddenly died of an asthma attack, my father-in-law and mother-in-law felt so guilty every day that they couldn't bear to look me in the eye. They took care of me in every way, afraid that I wouldn't be able to endure widowhood and would remarry someone else with their grandson. My own parents kept urging me to remarry, saying I couldn't possibly be a widow forever and tried to set me up with potential matches. But I was determined to remain faithful to my husband for life. I even reassured my in-laws to put their minds at ease, I would never agree to let my son call another man dad. For 3 years, no matter how hard or exhausting the days were without my husband by my side, I gritted my teeth and persevered. But it was on the 3rd anniversary of my husband's death. I accidentally overheard my father-in-law angrily scolding my uncle, Lucas, "The one who had asthma since childhood was your older brother, and the one who died was your older brother. Why did you have to stage a fake death and take on your brother's identity?" "Lucas? Isn't that my husband's name? What do you mean by fake death?" I stood frozen, still not processing what had happened, when the man's voice sounded next. "Dad, back then, when my sister-in-law was pregnant, how could she bear such a blow? As for Clara, I've already given her a son, so she won't be childless for the rest of her life, that's enough." From that day on, I decided to take on the responsibility of caring for my sister-in-law in place of my elder brother. As for the identity of Lucas, let it be buried once and for all. I had no heart to listen to the rest of the conversation, I only felt my hands and feet grow cold, and my head throbbed as if pierced by steel needles. It turned out that the one who died was not my husband at all, but his twin elder brother. And the husband who should have been closest to me, went so far as to fake his death and abandon me and our son, all to support another man's wife. At this moment, my tears finally burst forth uncontrollably. Lucas once saved me from the mire. When I was kidnapped and my reputation ruined, he never despised me. Instead, he knelt before me and proposed, vowing to treat me well for life. After marriage, he cared for me meticulously, never letting me suffer even the slightest grievance. Everyone said Lucas was a hopeless romantic, and I became the object of envy and jealousy among all the women in town. So after he passed away, I decided never to marry again for his sake. But now, thinking back, I realize how foolish I was. Lucas had always been healthy, never even caught a simple cold, how could he have died from asthma? So it turned out it was all an act on his part, pretending for 3 years, just to take care of the woman in his heart. Then what about me and our son? What do we mean to him? I desperately covered my mouth to keep from making a sound, turning away in embarrassment and running off. Back in the room, my son was awakened by the noise I made, rubbing his eyes. I looked at him and Lucas, their faces like they were cast from the same mold, and my heart ached as if cut by a knife. As a father, how could Lucas bear to let him, so young, carry the label of having no dad? Seeing the sorrow I tried to hide, my son's face was full of sympathy. "Mom, did Dad pretend not to know you again?" My heart jolted, and I suddenly remembered that after Lucas appeared as Nathan, my son had been calling him Dad all along, but at the time I always stopped him, telling him that wasn't Dad, it was Uncle. I just thought the child missed his father too much and couldn't tell the difference between his uncle who looked exactly the same, but I never expected that I was the one who was terribly wrong. It turned out that the child's eyes had always been sharp, he could always recognize his biological father, but he didn't understand why his real dad suddenly stopped acknowledging him overnight. No wonder Nathan was so good to me and my son, always bringing something for my son no matter what he bought, caring for him tenderly, occasionally sending meat and vegetables, quietly helping out financially, but the moment my son called him Dad, he became very strict, always quickly interrupting and correcting him. People said, to be an uncle to this extent, there's really nothing to complain about, even biological fathers rarely manage to do as much. Before knowing the truth, I was always very grateful to this uncle, keeping these favors in my heart and constantly thinking about how to repay him in the future. But now that I know the truth, everything feels so ironic. He was originally my son's biological father, isn't it only right for him to treat his son well? Doesn't his heart ache from doing these things? I couldn't hide the bitterness rising within me, never before had I felt so clearly that the Lucas I knew was already dead. He was the one who buried himself. And since I hadn't been involved with any man for 3 years because of him, this relationship could be considered over. After calming down, I looked seriously at my son and asked if he would be willing for Mom to marry someone else, to find him a new father. Mom, I don't know why Dad never acknowledged me, but since you don't want him anymore, then I don't want him either. Wherever you go, Noah will go with you. If Dad won't protect you, Noah will. Feeling my sorrow, Noah hugged me tightly, his small hands patting my back repeatedly, comforting me. In that moment, tears instantly welled up and spilled from my eyes, turning them red. All right. I held my son close, then called my parents. The call connected, but before I could say anything, my parents immediately began their usual earnest admonitions. Clara, ever since Lucas passed away, Adrian has come to propose more than a dozen times. You've known each other since childhood, you understand each other well, and besides, he's still a commander now. Why are you so stubborn, refusing to marry? I cut in directly. Mom, Dad, I've made up my mind. I agree to get married. There was a 5-second silence on the other end, then a burst of joy and disbelief. Are you serious? That's wonderful. We're just glad you've come to your senses. I'll get in touch right away and start preparing the wedding. Don't worry, Adrian has promised us many times that once you marry into the family, he'll treat Noah like his own son. As for you, just go and enjoy your life. Even through the phone, I could feel my parents' excitement. These past 3 years, they worried endlessly about me, but because of Lucas, I had disappointed them every time. But now, that won't happen anymore. The next day, I took my son downstairs to eat. At the table, Lucas was attentively serving dishes and pouring water for my sister-in-law and niece, bustling about. To anyone watching, it was the picture of a blissfully happy family of 3. Before I knew the truth, I had countless times envied my sister-in-law for being cared for, imagining that if Lucas hadn't died, he would have treated me just as well. But now, looking at this scene again, all I felt was bitter irony. My eyes stung unbearably, but I forced myself not to cry, because there was no one left to wipe my tears. Lucas caught sight of my pale, paper-white face and took the initiative to put a piece of meat on both my plate and my son's. You should eat more. Lucas is already dead, but even if you don't think for yourself, you have to think about your nephew. His tone was natural, showing concern for me as an uncle would, as if the Lucas he spoke of as dead wasn't really him. Uncle, I'm just here to serve Mom some food. But the next moment, my son raised his chopsticks, placed a piece of meat into my bowl, and then responded to Lucas with a mature understanding. Lucas's face suddenly changed upon hearing this, and he accidentally knocked over the bowl and chopsticks. Because this was the first time his son had called him uncle. Before, no matter how much he corrected him, his son had never called him uncle, always calling him dad. But today, the term uncle struck like a thunderclap, suddenly exploding in his mind. Noah, you always treated uncle as your dad before, so why did you change it today? He looked at his son, steadying himself before speaking. My son just smiled at him. Uncle, it was because Noah was little before that he kept mistaking you for dad. Now that Noah understands things, he knows my dad died 3 years ago. Don't worry, I won't call you the wrong name again. Lucas was dumbfounded by this and couldn't utter a word to refute it. In the end, he could only force a few nervous chuckles and say, "Is that so? Well, that's good." But his eyes kept scanning my son and me, as if trying to catch a hint from our faces. He picked up his chopsticks several times but didn't eat a single bite. My son and I didn't give him a glance and just kept our heads down, eating quietly. This made Lucas even more restless, frequently casting glances our way, and finally he spoke tentatively. Although I'm not Noah's father, Noah is no different from my biological son, we're all family. If you ever face any difficulties, just come to me for help, don't always bear it alone. I forced a bitter smile. Is it because his son no longer calls him dad that he regrets it? But he was the one who chose to fake his death, abandoning his son. I put down my chopsticks, took my son who had finished eating, and stood up immediately. Before leaving, I didn't thank him for taking care of my son as I used to. Instead, I stared straight into Lucas's stunned eyes and left him with one sentence. Big brother is right. No matter how close you are, you're not Noah's biological father after all. My son and I can live well on our own. Early the next morning, I went to the department store, bought the milk candies and pastries my son had wanted for a long time, and finally walked over to the wedding section. I pointed to a beautiful bright red wedding dress and asked the clerk to bring it down for a fitting. After coming out of the fitting room, looking at myself in the mirror who seemed several years younger, I was a bit stunned. The clerk looked at me and praised enthusiastically, "Is this for a wedding? Bright red is the most festive. So many people buy clothes here, but you're the first to wear this dress so beautifully." But I quietly took the dress off and pointed to another one in a more subdued color, asking the clerk to wrap it up for me. Because, for a widow, wearing red again at a second wedding is not allowed. As I walked out of the department store carrying bags full to the brim, I happened to run into Lucas, who was out shopping with my sister-in-law. He was momentarily taken aback when he saw me, then awkwardly greeted me, "Why are you suddenly out shopping?" Since he faked his death, I hadn't stepped outside the house, let alone had the leisure to go shopping. Seeing me with so many bags all of a sudden caught him off guard. I didn't want to get entangled with him, so I quickly came up with an excuse to brush him off. But when he brushed past me, he saw the wedding dress peeking out of my bag, and his expression suddenly grew serious. "We bought our wedding supplies here too, but back then the wedding dress was red." Now, the wedding dress in my bag had turned plain in color. "But I'm a widow, why would I be buying a wedding dress?" He stood there stunned for a long time, to the point that the sister-in-law next to him noticed something was off. In the evening, after I picked up my son from school and came home, I saw Lucas waiting at my doorstep, holding a brand new backpack. The tag from the international store was still on the backpack, clearly indicating it had cost quite a bit. "Noah, your uncle bought you an imported backpack as a gift for getting full marks on your exam. Take a look and see if you like it." My son glanced at me, then shook his head at Lucas in refusal. "Thank you, uncle, but I already have the old backpack Mom sewed for me." Lucas's gentle smile slowly shattered, his eyes revealing panic and unease. I gestured for my son to go back to his room first, then stood in front of him. "How can you keep taking advantage of uncle like this? You don't need to bring anything anymore." He looked a bit guilty and somewhat anxious. "Isn't it my duty as your uncle to take care of you? Don't be so formal with me." I just let out a cold laugh. He frowned, looking at me with some discomfort. "After all, I am your uncle. Do you have to treat me this way?" I stared straight at him, as if trying to see through him, not understanding how he had the nerve to say such things. "You said it yourself, you're just my uncle, not my husband. What right do you have to dictate how I should treat you?" Noah and I's consecutive odd behaviors finally made Lucas lose his composure. He excitedly tried to grab my hand, asking why I had suddenly changed my attitude overnight. But I dodged away, telling him I was just family and to mind his manners, then went inside and shut the door firmly. Standing at the doorway, Lucas was completely speechless. These 3 years, even though he took on the identity of my eldest brother, his life was no different from when he was Lucas. He still cared for me and our son, and we got along intimately. But now, hearing my warning, he finally realized that we were no longer in a relationship where anything was permissible. We had to keep a proper distance. That night, Lucas rushed out the door and bought 3 cans of malted milk in one go, spending all the money he had saved, planning to give these gifts to me and Noah the next day and offer a proper apology. No matter what, I have to mend the relationship between my son and me. But he doesn't know that tonight is the last night the two of us will spend in this home. At dawn the next day, Noah and I packed our bags to the brim and were picked up by the military. Before entering the base, the station soldier smiled and called me sister-in-law, complimented my beauty, praised my son for being smart and adorable, and said their commander had gotten a great bargain. I smiled. During those 3 years, I never wore a single bright-colored outfit, barely ate any meat, and lived like an ascetic. My son, out of sympathy, joined me in eating vegetarian meals, his face always pale from the lack of nutrients. Now, I can finally let go completely. Even my son's little face is filled with anticipation for his new dad. My fiancé Adrian went all out for this wedding banquet, setting up dozens of tables filled with meat and dishes only available at state-run restaurants. He even invited the entire military district to attend and had people spread the word on the streets. Anyone who came to congratulate us would receive wedding candies. Every move he made showed how much he valued me, his new bride. Meanwhile, at the Lucas household, Lucas had been ready all morning to apologize to Noah and me. He waited downstairs, looking left and right, but neither my son nor I came down for breakfast. He looked up at the floor above, feeling an inexplicable sense that something was wrong. Carrying malted milk and fruit, he went upstairs and knocked on the door, but no one came to open it. That uneasy feeling grew stronger, and finally, he became anxious. He hurriedly forced the door open with brute strength, only to find the room empty. After faking his death and assuming a new identity, he could no longer be with me day and night. Yet, under the same roof, seeing each other constantly, I spent my days quietly at home, chanting sutras and praying for him, sinking into sorrow, hardly ever stepping outside. Early in the morning, where could my son and I possibly go? Thinking again of that wedding dress, his brow twitched sharply, and the certainty he once had vanished. He hurriedly tried to go out to find my parents, asking if they knew where I had gone, but was dragged away without a word by a comrade who came to deliver an invitation, heading toward the military district. Today is the commander's big happy day. As subordinates, we must attend and celebrate. I heard the bride's ex-husband died, leaving her and her son to suffer who knows how much. Luckily, now she's become part of the commander's family. It's truly a match made by heaven. Lucas, still upset and confused because he couldn't find me and my son, half-heartedly agreed, barely paying attention to what the comrade was saying. It wasn't until they entered the military family compound and he heard people around saying, wishing Commander Adrian and Clara a lifetime of happiness, that he froze on the spot as if struck by lightning. He panicked, hastily grabbing his comrade's shoulder and demanding, "The bride's name is Clara?" But before he could finish, the next moment, I was already walking out, holding Adrian's and my son's hands, facing his incredulous gaze. In the next instant, Lucas's eyes turned bright red. He seemed to forget about the Commander Adrian and his comrades beside him, then looked at me excitedly and questioned, "Clara, how can you get married?" My emotions were completely calm. I just looked at him and asked, "My husband has been dead for years, so why can't I marry someone else?" He looked like a rooster with its neck squeezed, his face flushed bright red but unable to utter a word. In the end, he could only manage a few strained words, "But didn't you say before that you were devoted to Lucas and would never marry again in this lifetime?" I smiled. I was wrong before. Lucas, up in heaven, would surely want me to find a good home. Our son also really likes his new dad. As if to confirm my words, our son immediately hugged Adrian's arm and sweetly called him Dad. No man could bear to hear his own son call another man Dad. Lucas could no longer keep his composure. He rushed forward, intent on separating his son from Adrian. But his disruptive behavior was quickly noticed by his comrades, who sensed the tension and pulled him away, repeatedly apologizing to me. I no longer paid him any mind and continued to entertain the guests, quickly getting acquainted with the other military families. Meanwhile, Lucas, dragged far from the wedding banquet, hung his head in despair, unsure how to process this explosive truth. I really did marry someone else with our son. And he, as the eldest uncle, didn't even have the right to oppose it. He unknowingly walked back home, completely unable to understand why I suddenly changed my mind. How could I, who had faithfully mourned him for 3 whole years, ever betray him? Distracted, he accidentally knocked over the ancestral tablet, toppling the incense burner as well, scattering choking ash all over the floor. Only then did he notice that the tablet, which I had always kept spotless, was now covered in a thick layer of dust, clearly not wiped for several days. Since he had faked his death, I had been reciting sutras and praying for him every day. How could this happen? Unless I had already uncovered the truth that he was never really dead. Lucas's pupils dilated wildly, unable to believe it, yet my various odd behaviors left him no choice but to believe. Yes, the son had been insisting on calling him dad from beginning to end. If he had the heart, how could I not have noticed? But what had he done? Time and again, he pushed the son away, refusing to acknowledge him. He devoted all his energy to taking care of his sister-in-law and her daughter, while completely neglecting his own wife and child. My parents were right. Why on earth did he have to put on such a clumsy act? He treated others like fools, so all he could do was watch helplessly as his wife and child built a new family with someone else. What right does he have to demand that I never marry for the rest of my life? All the past memories struck him like a sharp slap across the face. He knelt on the ground, trying to gather the incense ashes, but they kept slipping through his fingers. What's done is done. Staring at the mess on the floor, Lucas was finally overwhelmed by a belated wave of regret. At that moment, footsteps came from outside the door. Lucas, delighted, thought my son and I had changed our minds, but when he turned his head, he was disappointed to see it was my sister-in-law. My sister-in-law looked at his disheveled appearance with an awkward smile. "Nathan, how could you mess up your brother's spirit like this?" But Lucas didn't give her a chance to react. He confessed directly, "Sister-in-law, I'm sorry. I lied to you. Actually, it was the eldest brother who died 3 years ago. I pretended to be him because I was afraid you wouldn't accept it." He expected my sister-in-law to be shocked, to wail and scold him for disregarding family ethics, but instead, she showed a guilty expression, as if she had known all along. He suddenly felt his vision darken. He had pitted his sister-in-law for losing her husband, which was why he couldn't help but take extra care of her. But he never expected that the woman in his heart had long known the truth and wanted to play along with the deception, turning him around like a puppet. His sister-in-law shouted fiercely, "Yeah, I've known for a long time that you're not Nathan, but what could I do? Without a man to support the family, how could I and the child survive? Weren't you willing to?" Lucas angrily questioned her, "Didn't you ever think about how hard Clara suffered, becoming a widow and raising her son alone? How tough her life must be. Are you really that heartless?" But his sister-in-law was indifferent. "What does that have to do with me? You never thought about your own wife and child, so on what grounds do you question whether I have a conscience?" Those words pierced Lucas's heart like the sharpest blade, leaving it riddled with wounds, and he couldn't utter a single word in rebuttal. In a fit of rage and distress, he even spat out blood. Ignoring his sister-in-law's screams, Lucas collapsed to the ground, crying out in agony. Tears mixed with blood distorted his face beyond recognition as he tore at his heart, calling out my name and my son's, even though we couldn't hear him at all. He regretted it, truly regretted it. He was now determined to bring me and our son back, to do everything possible to make it up to us, even if it took 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years to earn forgiveness. He was willing to accept that. This bitter fruit was of his own making, and naturally, he had to swallow it himself. Having come to this realization, he wiped his tears with his sleeve and rushed out toward the military district. After the wedding banquet ended, I settled our son to sleep, then began tidying up the aftermath with Adrian. He didn't even let me touch a pair of chopsticks. He took on all the work himself, telling me to just rest well. Watching his busy figure moving back and forth, my heart softened completely. After going through those distressing days with the Lucas family, being cared for so attentively by someone else felt like such a stark contrast. My parents said Adrian had liked me for many years. They heard that after I got married, he remained single. Later, when I became a widow, he once again thought of marrying me. Unfortunately, at that time I insisted on remaining faithful to Lucas, so Adrian waited for me another 3 years, which is why the marriage was delayed until now. His feelings for me were no less than what I once had for Lucas, perhaps even stronger. Fortunately, we finally ended up together. Just as I finished tidying up, the front door was slammed with loud bangs, as if it were about to be shattered. I frowned, stepped forward, and opened the door. An unexpected, yet somehow anticipated person appeared before me. It was Lucas. The corners of his mouth still bore traces of blood he hadn't wiped away, and his clothes were filthy, covered in dust. I took a step back without a word, harboring a disdain even I hadn't realized. Lucas collapsed to his knees before me with a thud, pain and restraint etched on his face. "Clara, you found out, haven't you? I never died, I lied to you all this time. Do whatever you want to me, just as long as you get your revenge." I looked down at him without changing my expression. "I won't take it out on you, because I no longer care." He stared at me blankly. "How could that be? How could you not be angry? Even I feel like I deserve to die 1,000 deaths." At that moment, our son, awakened by the noise, rubbed his eyes and came out. Suddenly, a spark of hope ignited in Lucas's eyes. No matter what, the boy was his own flesh and blood, an unchangeable fact. But the first words out of our son's mouth shattered that hope. "Uncle, what are you doing here?" Lucas felt utterly hopeless. Now even his own son refused to acknowledge him. "I'm your dad. Haven't you always been able to recognize me?" My son is so little, yet his tone is as steady as an adult's. "You're the one who wouldn't let me call you that. I already admit you're my uncle now, so why are you still unhappy? Besides, my new dad treats me very well." "Uncle, please don't bother us anymore." Lucas stammered for a long time but couldn't get a single word out. Adrian came over just in time, took my hand and my son's, and bluntly gave Lucas the boot. Looking at the three of us, happy as a family, there was simply no place left for him. Lucas could only watch helplessly as the door closed right in front of him. Lucas didn't give up. Day after day, he brought vegetables and fruits to apologize to me and my son. When I didn't open the door for him, he would leave the items at the doorstep and walk away. Without batting an eye, I distributed everything to the neighbors. He even bought new stationery and toys for my son, but my son pushed them away with a firm hand. "Uncle, you should go take care of Auntie's daughter instead. I really like the old school bag Mom sewed for me." After saying that, he gently touched the already patched-up backpack and hopped off to school. Lucas watched his son's retreating figure and couldn't help but think of the 3 years I had mourned for him. Everyone told our son that his father was dead, but the boy never stopped calling him Dad affectionately every day, his admiring gaze impossible to hide. Yet, to keep the secret of his faked death, he tirelessly corrected the way his son addressed him. He still remembered vividly how his son's eyes reddened on the spot, filled with confusion and hurt, and later, the deep disappointment. My son could only be mocked by his classmates as a fatherless child. Yet he treated the aunt's daughter as his own, as if she were his biological child. So now that my son refuses to forgive him, it's his own fault. Lucas stood in the yard, dejected, for a long time, from dawn until dusk, until he finally saw me returning. His expression brightened, and he wanted to rush forward immediately, but when he saw Adrian standing beside me, he quietly withdrew, not daring to come closer. I looked at the toy in his hand, sighed, and took the initiative to step forward. Lucas clearly hadn't expected me to soften my stance. He was so excited he didn't know what to say. 1,000 words boiled down to just one: "Have you been doing well lately?" I nodded, indicating that I had been doing well. He only realized he had asked a foolish question after he said it. How could I be doing poorly? I went from being thin and frail while mourning him to now having a rosy complexion. Since leaving him, I've been living much better than before. He doesn't compare in the slightest to my new partner. All he brought me was endless suffering. Lucas hung his head in guilt and handed me a thick envelope. "This is the compensation the factory gave after I faked my death. Keep it well and spend it however you want." At the very least, this was the small, insignificant way he could make amends. But I didn't accept it. Instead, I said pointedly, "My son and I are very happy now, and we don't want anyone to disturb that happiness. He should understand what I meant." With that, I turned away without a trace of hesitation, taking Adrian by the hand and stepping inside. Lucas remained standing there, like a stiff statue, rooted to the spot for a long while. Since the day I made my stance clear, Lucas never came to bother me and my son again. I spent a period of peaceful and happy days. However, an explosive piece of news shattered this situation. Before, he would check on me and my son every day, trying to make amends. To those unaware of the truth, he was still my uncle, which sparked rumors. When my sister-in-law found out about this, she had a huge fight with him. Lucas completely broke ties with her, bluntly stating he would no longer be a fool, helping my brother support her and the child. In a fit of anger, my sister-in-law chose to send a letter of complaint to the military district leadership, clearly detailing his faked death, stirring up a huge storm. Lucas was originally a worker. It was his older brother Nathan who was the soldier. My father-in-law and mother-in-law had initially tacitly approved his actions, probably because they couldn't bear to lose the generous military allowances. Whether it was impersonating a soldier or having an illicit affair with my sister-in-law, in this era, both were considered the gravest of crimes. The military district's efficiency was swift. Before long, Lucas was publicly reprimanded throughout the entire district, stripped of his rank, and sentenced to 10 years. As for his tangled relationships, to my surprise, the investigation found that Lucas had not crossed any lines. This gave me a slight change of heart about him, but only a slight one. A mistake is a mistake, there's no room for negotiation. As for the factory, they were unwilling to accept such a morally corrupt employee any longer, and even took back the compensation they had initially given, adding insult to injury for Lucas's already disgraced family. Faced with such an outcome, all I could do was sigh at the justice of karma and continue to build my new family well. I found a job as a Chinese language teacher in the military district, responsible for teaching the children and imparting knowledge. I had always been interested in education and nurturing others, and this job gave me a sense of purpose and meaning in life. The hardships I endured in the past did not break me, instead, they gradually became the nourishment that fueled my climb upward, blossoming into vibrant, dewy flowers. My son no longer quietly suffered from the lack of his biological father's love. He learned a truth: not all parents deserve to be parents, and at least someone like Lucas certainly does not. And he already has a new father who treats him very well. Our home is filled with laughter and joy every day, everything is moving in a positive direction. Time flew by, the seasons changed, and my son gradually grew into adulthood. Inside me, a new little life was also growing, ready to sprout. My son was over the moon, shouting every day that he was going to be a big brother. One day, as usual, I was basking in the sun in the yard when I saw my former father-in-law and mother-in-law, whom I hadn't seen for a long time, appearing before me in tattered clothes. Compared to before, the two elders had grown much thinner and much older. Their faces were covered with wrinkles weathered by time, and their hair was almost completely gray. They trembled as they handed me something, leaving behind 2 lines of murky tears. "Child, regarding what happened back then, in the end, it was us who wronged you." Although they were not the ones who made the mistake, they were also accomplices who indirectly contributed to everything. I quietly watched them, without saying any words of forgiveness like "it's okay" or "it's in the past." Otherwise, it would be irresponsible to my son and to the person I was back then. I lowered my eyes to look at what my former in-laws handed me. It was the marriage certificate from when Lucas and I got married. It was called a marriage certificate, but in reality, it was just a stamped piece of paper, neatly inscribed with my and Lucas's names, declaring us husband and wife under the witness of the party, promising to walk hand in hand for life and progress together. I still remember when we first received the certificate, Lucas was afraid of tearing it, so he specially went to a photo studio to laminate it, treasuring it as if it were some fragile treasure. I casually flipped the paper to the back and unexpectedly saw a line of small handwriting. "Clara, the 3 years married to you were the most beautiful time in my barren life. I will no longer ask for forgiveness, only hope that you and our son can live safely for a lifetime." At the end of the writing, there were traces of tears that had soaked the paper, blurring the ink into a hazy smear. I didn't say much, only felt a wave of relief, then returned the paper, watching the 2 elderly figures with their bent backs slowly walk away until they disappeared from sight. The aroma of food wafted from inside the house, accompanied by Adrian's son calling out repeatedly. I smiled happily and replied, "I'm coming," then slowly got up and walked toward them. The sunlight remained dazzling and warm, soothing all the wounds in my heart. The road ahead is still long. The end.